The bells were of heavy brass worked by a rope. Prabhupada wanted the bell in the temple to be rung constantly during the Arti Kirtans. It took weeks for Gunarnavar to arrange it. And the bell in the temple door was particularly difficult since the rope rubbed on the stone balls and soon snapped. The thicker rope Gunarnavar got simply spoiled the clarity of the chime and made the ringing uneven, which Prabhupada immediately noticed. Gunarnavar tried a chain too heavy. A nylon rope broke. Materials were scarce in Vrindavan, and each change meant another delay, sometimes days. Nothing seemed to make the bell work properly. Srila Prabhupada told Gunarnavar to try a pulley. Somehow Gunarnavar couldn't surrender to that particular instruction. He thought the rope would just jump the track. One of the devotees did purchase a pulley, but Gunarnavar said it was useless. When Prabhupada called Gunarnavar to his room and demanded, "Where are the pulley wheels?" Gunarnavar said he had sent them back. "You rascal," Prabhupada shouted, "I am asking for pulleys and you're sending them back." Gunarnavar apologized, ran out and got a pulley. It didn't work. Then he got the idea of designing a bracket with a hole in it. The next morning, Prabhupada came out of his room and walked around to the front of the temple to check on the bell. For Gunarnavar and others, the whole affair was becoming unbearable. "Let us hear the bell," said Prabhupada. Giving mighty tugs to the rope, a devotee rang the bell again and again. "No, that's wrong," said Prabhupada. Gunarnavar showed Prabhupada the wooden bracket arrangement, and Prabhupada thought it was a good idea. Gunarnavar even tried to improve it by greasing the hole, and it worked for a while, but then the rope snapped again. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 8, Text 27. It's in prose form.
Yes.
Dadinam api parshva vartinam atmajam ivanu suchantam avipakshamanno mrika eva vinaveshita mana vishitya lokam imam saha mrikena kalevaram mritam anu namrita janmanusmiti itaravan mrika shariram avapa tadanam at that time api indeed parshvavartinam by the side of his deathbed atmajam his own son eva like Anusuchantam lamenting Abhivikshamana seeing Mrige Eva certainly Abhinaveshitas manaha his mind was absorbed. Vishritya giving up. Lokam world. Imam this. Saha with. Mrigena the deer. Kalevaram his body. Mritam died. Anu thereafter. Not. Mrita destroyed. Janma Anusmriti remembrance of the incident before his death. Itaravat like others. Mriga Shariram the body of a deer. Avapa God. Translation. At the time of death, the king saw that the deer was sitting by his side, exactly like his own son, and was lamenting his death. Actually, the mind of the king was absorbed in the body of the deer, and consequently, like those bereft of Krishna consciousness, he left the world, the deer, and his material body, and acquired the body of a deer. However, there was one advantage. Although he lost his human body and received the body of a deer, he did not forget the incidents of his past life. Please repeat. At the time of death.
At the time of death.
The king saw that the deer was sitting by his side.
The king saw that the deer was sitting by his side.
Exactly like his own son.
Exactly like his own son.
And was lamenting his death.
And was lamenting his death.
Actually, the mind of the king was absorbed in the body of the deer.
Actually, the mind of the king was absorbed in the body of the deer.
And consequently,
like
those bereft of Krishna consciousness, he left the world, the deer and his material body, and acquired the body of a deer. However, there was one advantage. Although he lost his human body, and received the body of a deer, he did not forget the incidents of his past life.
He did not forget the incidents of his past life.
There was a difference between Bharat Maharaj's acquiring a deer body and others acquiring different bodies according to their mental condition at the time of death. After death, others forget everything that has happened in their past lives, but Bharat Maharaj did not forget. According to the Bhagavad Gita, Yam Yam Vapi Smaram Bhavam Tyajati Anti Kalevaram Tam Tam Eveti Konteya Sadata Bhava. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. Bhagavad Gita 8.6. After quitting his body, a person gets another body, according to his mental condition at the time of death. At death, a person always thinks of that subject matter in which he has been engrossed during his life. According to this law, because Bharat Maharaj was always thinking of the deer and forgetting his worship of the Supreme Lord, he acquired the body of a deer. However, due to his having been elevated to the topmost platform of devotional service, he did not forget the incidents of his past life. This special benediction saved him from further deterioration. Due to his past activities in devotional service, he became determined to finish his devotional service even in the body of a deer. It is therefore said in this verse, Mritam, although he had died, Anu afterwards, Namrta Janmanusmriti Itaravat, he did not forget the incidents of his past life as others forget them. As stated in Brahma Samhita, Karmani Nirdhahati Kintu Cha Bhakti Bhajam, Bhagavad Brahma Samhita 554, it is proved herein that due to the grace of the Supreme Lord, a devotee is never vanquished. Due to his willful neglect of devotional service, a devotee may be punished for a short time, but he again revives his devotional service and returns home back to Godhead. Om Jnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuruntamana Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Verse again. At the time of death, the king saw that the deer was sitting by his side exactly like his own son and was lamenting his death. Actually, the mind of the king was absorbed in the body of the deer, and consequently, like those bereft of Krishna consciousness, he left the world, the deer, and his material body and acquired the body of a deer. However, there was one advantage. Although he lost his human body and received the body of a deer, he did not forget the incidents of his past life. So, this is the conclusion of what happened to Bharat Maharaj in this situation. His attachment for the deer became so intense that even at the time of death, all he could meditate on was the deer, and in that way he got the body of a deer. So it's a very sad and an unfortunate situation, because you can see Bharat Maharaj was the emperor of the world. You know, he ruled the great Vaishnava king, and he was the son of Rishabhadev. He was an incarnation of Krishna, so he was such an exalted personality and such a great devotee that he was detached from his kingdom, his wife, his children, his great power and prestige, his powerful position. And he also helped so many other people in his kingdom to become Krishna conscious. And so he left everything, and he was actually experiencing such ecstasy, bhava, symptoms of great ecstatic love for Krishna. And then this is what happened to him at the end of all that. Due to that unfortunate situation, he became attached to a deer, and he takes the body of a deer in his next life, so it's quite sad. But although he got the body of a deer, he still remembered his past life, and so his consciousness was still like in that human consciousness, because he could remember all the activities of his past life. So even in the deer body, he was able to progress. And so it actually helped him to have this deer body. Actually helped him, gave him some impetus or inspiration to continue in his spiritual progress. So Bharat Maharaj, had become negligent of his spiritual duties, but when he got the body of the deer, he actually became more serious in his spiritual life. So actually, he learned his lesson. He understood what had happened in his past life. He understood that he had neglected his spiritual duties, and this is like the reaction for that. So it's actually Krishna was helping and pushing him to help him in his Krishna consciousness by giving him that body. And we see different examples like this in the Bhagavatam. There's the sons of Kuvera, they were intoxicated by their wealth and their power and wealth and women. But then when Narada Muni came and seen them in that condition, he cursed them to become trees. And in that form of trees, they also became serious in their Krishna consciousness, and it helped them to progress in their spiritual life. So sometimes there may be some difficulty, but it's to help us revive our Krishna consciousness in so many ways. And Srila Prabhupada is pointing out in his purport that Bharat's neglect was willful. It was an intentional neglect. It wasn't like accidental. And this is quite, we see that it's a quite, how Maya is so strong, and we're willfully entering into Maya, so it's quite scary that we can easily come off the path of Krishna consciousness by some neglect, and easily fall down if we're not very serious in our Krishna consciousness. So there was an analogy I heard recently that just like wherever there's cracks, and water will seep through the cracks, in any crack there is in the floor or whatever, then the water will seep through it. So similarly, if we have cracks in our consciousness, then Maya will enter and seep through those cracks and somehow distract us from remembering Krishna or our service. So we have to really control this mind, and we can't really trust our mind, because our mind is personally not my best friend. So we can't really trust an enemy. If the mind is like an enemy, sometimes it wants to do different things. So we can't give it full trust. And Srila Prabhupada said that we can control our mind, but always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. But are we always thinking of Krishna? Are we always thinking of the service? So if we can't think of Krishna when we're chanting japa, then it's very difficult to think of Krishna at any other time, because this is the time where the most chance we've got of thinking of Krishna is during our japa. So at least during japa time, we should think of Krishna or meditate on his qualities, his name, his form, his qualities, because at other times of the day we may not have that opportunity. So and we don't know at the time of death how fortunate we're going to be. Are we going to be surrounded by Krishna devotees? Are we going to be, who are chanting the holy names? Are we going to remember Krishna? Are we going to be able to chant his names? We don't know. So it's very, very precarious. It's not very sure. And there was an incident a few years ago. A bird banged into the Vishnu lounge window, and I got a call from Palika saying, well, there's a bird that's just fallen, he's banged his beak against the wall, against the window, and it looks like it's going to die. So she put the bird in a box and she brought it to my house, and we could see that the bird wasn't going to live for too long, so we thought, well, what can we do for this poor bird? So we just played Srila Prabhupada chanting japa. I don't know how many hours it was. And the bird became quite peaceful, and then it left its body. So it was, and I thought, well, actually, this bird is really fortunate, because most birds don't get a chance to hear Prabhupada chanting japa at the time of their death. You know, even most devotees don't, maybe not have that opportunity. But this bird seemed to be very fortunate, although it was in a painful situation and a very difficult situation for it, but still it got the chance to hear the holy name from a pure devotee at the time of death. You know, that's actually the best situation any living entity can have, is to be able to have that opportunity. And I thought, well, this must be a very fortunate soul that got that opportunity. So we don't know at the time of death what our situation is going to be, how we're going to leave our body. So we have to practice in our lifetime to be able to chant and remember Krishna, so that at the time of death we can actually have that meditation and that understanding to be able to chant. And so sometimes a painful situation can be the means of our progress or advancement in spiritual life. And we may have to undergo some humbling experiences to rectify our consciousness, to help us advance more quickly, and to make us more serious in our Krishna consciousness. And Krishna says, one who remembers me alone at the time of death. So it needs to be Krishna alone, not Krishna with all our attachments and all our desires and all our, so it needs to be Krishna alone. So we have to practice this during our lifetime. And there was a nice story I heard by this devotee, and she was talking about this disciple of Bhakti Saraswati Thakur. He was a brahmachari, a very nice devotee, but he found that he had some sort of illness and he didn't have long to live, maybe like 3 years or something, I'm not sure. And so he asked if he could go see his mother for the last time before he left his body. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, no, sorry, you can't go see your mother. So this brahmachari was quite, upset, and he wasn't sure why he wasn't allowed to go see. It's the last time he'll be able to see his mother. But he had to stay in the ashram. So then when he found out that he only had a few days left to live, then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told his disciples, take this brahmachari to his mother, to see his mother. And the brahmachari said, no, I've only got a few days left, I don't want to go see my mother now, I can leave my body anytime, I want to leave my body in the dam. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, no, take him to see his mother. So the devotees took him in the train, put him in the train, but he left his body in the train. So then he didn't get to see his mother, and he didn't get to die in the holy dam. So one of the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur went to his Guru Maharaj and said, I don't understand why you did all this, because this devotee didn't get a chance to see his mother, and neither did he leave his body in the dam, so he didn't achieve either of the goals. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said the reason was because he didn't send him to see his mother is because when he would go see his mother, because he hadn't seen his mother for a long time, his mother would be telling him all the mundane things like, such and such uncle died, or such and such person got married. So it would all be just mundane subject matters. So this devotee would have just wasted his time to go see his mother. So the disciple said, I understand, but then why did you not let him leave his body in the dam? Why did you send him away? And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, it's because when he was in the dam, all he was thinking was he didn't get a chance to see his mother. So when he left the holy dam, his whole consciousness was, I wanted to leave my body in the dam. He was just constantly thinking of the holy dam. So that he left his body thinking and meditating on the holy dam. So actually, that was for his welfare. So sometimes the instructions that we get may not be to our liking, but sometimes we have to be cruel to be kind. So although this brahmachari didn't get what he wanted at the time he wanted it, but still for his spiritual benefit, the spiritual master gave him that instruction so that he could actually progress in spiritual life. So I found that a really interesting story. So, we may be surrounded by devotees in the holy Dham at the time of death, but ultimately we still have to fly our own plane, we still have to be Krishna conscious. We may get all the input from the devotees, but ultimately we have to, in the end, we have to do it on our own. And I was listening to Urmila Mataji's lecture, and it was quite interesting points that she made. So I was going to say a few things that she mentioned. She said that Prabhupada said that Bharat Maharaj willfully and purposefully gave up his Krishna consciousness and fell into Maya. So she was saying that it's similar to the Ajamil story, because Ajamil also was a victim of circumstance. He also fell from his spiritual practices, and but he was saved at the end by calling Narayan. But here we see Bharat Maharaj, he wasn't saved in the same way. Although he was in a very exalted state of consciousness, he fell down into the body of a deer. So she made the point that Ajamil's fall down was Prabhupada considered accidental, whereas Bharat Maharaj's fall down was purposeful, was willful. So she said, what's the difference? What's the difference? Because if you see the two stories, it looks very similar. So what's the difference between the accidental and willful fall down? How can we see, what's the difference?
Because he did it consciously. It was like, because they say accidental fall down, Krishna will save you from. But if it's a premeditated fall down, then that's more insidious, isn't it? You're just having it's an innocent thing to have an accident, but to plan to do something.
But how is it different from Ajamil? Because, you could say that.
Well, Ajamil, he didn't premeditate that I'm going to look at this prostitute now, and I'm going to fall down. It was a fall down which happened accidentally, and he wasn't able to control himself after that. He didn't plan to do it, did he?
So, she was saying that the reason that one's accidental, one's willful, is because Bharat Maharaj was in a higher level of consciousness. He was in the level of Bhava. And somebody on that level, they can see Maya for what it is. They're not an illusion, they're not so illusioned. So he actually could see that this is Maya, but he purposefully let it happen. He didn't stop, he didn't think, this is Maya, I better be careful. He just let himself get absorbed in it. So, whereas Ajamil wasn't on such a high level of consciousness, he wasn't in the level of Bhava. So when Maya came, he wasn't thinking that this is Maya, he wasn't aware of it. So, that's why his was actually accidental, considered accidental, because it wasn't like he purposefully, realised this is Maya and just went into it. Bharat Maharaj could see that it was Maya. And because a person in Srija Baba, he can see that, because he sees Maya for what it is, he doesn't see that it's enjoyable, doesn't think that something is enjoyable, material energy is enjoyable, but because he actually fell for that, you see. And Krishna describes, in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2, Krishna describes how one falls down into the material consciousness, he contemplates on the objects of the senses. A person develops lust for them, attachment for them, and then from attachment lust develops, from lust anger arises, from anger delusion, from delusion bewilderment of memory, from memories bewildered intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So Ajamil wasn't able to recognise at the attachment stage that he was in an illusion, so he wasn't able to see it for what it was, whereas Bharat Maharaj could tell even before the contemplation stage that this is an illusion. So he could actually see that it was an illusion, you see. Therefore his engagement with Maya was willful and intentional, because he could see what he was doing, whereas Ajamil couldn't, And So both of them had to go through tribulation. Bharat Maharaj, his tribulation was that he ended up becoming the body of a deer, and Ajamil got to see the Yamadutas, so that was a tribulation too. So both cases, it shows that Krishna still saved both of them in some way or another. He helped them both. Krishna, like Krishna says, Happy Sudharacharo, that even if a devotee commits some abominable action, then he will become quickly righteous and attain lasting peace. But we shouldn't take advantage of this thinking, well, Krishna will save me, I can just do a bit of Maya and there won't be a problem, Krishna will save me. We have to take precautions and not take a chance. And so if we're on a certain level of consciousness, we've made a certain level of advancement, and if we willfully fall down, that is, we know that it's Maya and we fall for it. Whereas an accident fall down is that we don't even know we're fallen in that condition until we're completely covered by it. Then we realise it. So how do we become free from this accidental fall downs? How can we prevent ourselves from an accidental fall down?
Suggestion is that one way is we can see that we're always having accidental fall downs. That we're always making very small willful decisions to act in illusion. And so it's not something we have to prepare for in the future, but it's something we're constantly facing now. So therefore we can constantly pray. I'm in illusion, I'm falling down, I'm willfully doing the wrong thing. So therefore I need Krishna's mercy all the time. I need the devotee's mercy all the time. So at least then we're at least we're practicing all the time to take shelter of the holy name, to take shelter of the process. I was just, I think it was Mary who posted something about the last instruction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta to his disciples. I don't know if you saw that. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was saying, whether you think you're successful or whether you think you're a failure in your practice of devotional service, there'll always be successes and there'll always be failures. And you can't depend on so-called successes to give you the strength to be able to perform devotional service. You just have to be determined to always make the best endeavour to hear and chant. And so that's that.
Yes, that's nice, thank you. We also have to cultivate we have to be honest with ourselves and see what situations trigger us to do the wrong thing, like what causes our difficulty. So, what situations when we tend to lose our intelligence, like we tend to become greedy or lusty or or angry. We have to recognise them before they overwhelm us. So we have to really hear Srimad Bhagavatam, hear different devotees talking about deepening our realizations, because hearing doesn't just mean like we've done our bit of reading, we've done our Bhakti Shastri, but it really means to actually understand, where I'm at, how to apply this knowledge in our daily life, how to go deeper, and we shouldn't have to learn in an extreme way. We should learn by hearing. That's like intelligence. That we hear about things and we contemplate it, how to apply the philosophy in our life. So we can recognise Maya when she comes. When she gives us temptations. We recognise that this is a temptation. So we have to be really have rapt attention when we're chanting, reading, hearing, whatever we're doing. There has to be rapt attention. And in the last part of in the last part of the whole pastime, even Jagannath, then Prabhupada says that Bharata Maharaj's mistake was he didn't consult with his guru, and he was living apart from his devotees. So it's important to live in the proximity of devotees, because we need somebody to point out to us when we're in Maya. We may not see it, we may completely be covered by it. So we need devotees to point out before we fall down into the deep well, of Maya. Then we need some devotees to point it out.
Well, the original question you're asking, how the devotee can protect himself. Krishna says in the Bhagavatam, Tad Vijadatmano Mayam. So you have to learn what is the illusory energy and what isn't the illusory energy. Ishopanishad says you need to learn the process of nescience alongside. And Vishnu Chakravarti gives us 6 different forms of unsteady devotional service, Vikalpa, mental vacillation, Vishaya Sagra, fighting with the sense objects, telling them. So there's all these different stages of unsteady devotional service. So if your service isn't steady, then it'll be one of those problems, that's there. And then if you can quantify what it is, what your problem is, understand what your Maya is, then you can start looking at strategies of how you're going to identify. So it's not that we shouldn't see Maya, we should be fully aware of what it is and how we are in Maya, and then see what steps we'll need to take. And it's self-realization. So if we get distracted by trying to work out everybody else, then we lose the opportunity of working out what we need to do for ourselves. We should be working on ourselves.
Yeah, so when we realise that something is distracting me from my Krishna consciousness, then we should try to avoid it. We shouldn't just go into it. That's like, going into the fire. It's like if something's going to burn us, we don't touch it. So if something's going to make us lusty or angry or bring out some anarthas in us, we try to avoid that so that it doesn't bring it out. We don't just fall right into it. So we try to avoid those things that are unfavourable for our Krishna consciousness, and accept those things that are favourable for our Krishna consciousness. So it means that we really need to have somebody, at least one person in our life, that can tell us, that we can accept their instructions if we're going wrong, if we're getting distracted or we're getting into Maya. Then we need somebody in our life that can tell us that we're actually need to get out of this Maya. So that's why we need association of devotees, why we need a guru, because we need to be told how to avoid the wrong things. So and we need to accept feedback. We need to be able to accept feedback so that we can progress. So we have to have a full schedule of engagement. Prabhupada says we shouldn't have any gaps, that Maya can come in to seep in, So, but gaps doesn't mean we should become like workaholics and we shouldn't have any time for anything else. It doesn't mean we have, because if we think that I'll 24/7 I'll just do tapasya and that's it, and that will stop Maya coming in. It's not necessarily going to happen, because that's going to, we have needs that need fulfilled. So I should go to bed. When Mataji was explaining there's 3 different kinds of duties, she was quoting Srila Prabhupada saying that there's ordinary duties, there's emergency duties, and there's desired duties. So ordinary duties is chanting 16 vows, attending the morning program, hearing class, doing service duties according to our Varna ashram, whatever, whether you're a brahmachari or householder, and emergency duties are reserved for emergencies that, you know, all of a sudden we have to cover for somebody else, or, you know, this shouldn't be all the time. We shouldn't be on a marathon all the time. We should be like an emergency. And desired activities is what I like to do. So, you know, we may have talents and abilities, and we may like doing certain things, like we may like playing musical instruments to kill time, we may like gardening, we may like sewing or embroidery, or you know, studying Srila Prabhupada's books, even learning verses. Some devotees like learning verses, so that's a hobby for them, you know. So there has to be some Krishna conscious recreation, so that everyone can have that Krishna conscious hobby. It's necessary to have that, so that we have a life that's full of Krishna consciousness, not just the work, but aspect where the recreation is also part of Krishna consciousness. So it meets our needs. So, because if we don't meet those needs, then they'll be met in So similarly, we need to have our spiritual needs fulfilled as well. You know, so the soul needs to have some recreation, some Krishna conscious recreation, which is they feel satisfied with, so they won't become absorbed in anything mundane. It won't take them away. So so you have to have a full life of Krishna consciousness, activities, you know, there's work, there's recreation, and also sanghas where we can deepen our Krishna consciousness, and not just, you know, we need to have good relationships, we need to have loving relationships where we can deepen our, you know, introspection, and have good, you know, discussions with Krishna consciousness to go deeper, and that will help give us satisfaction as well. So in that way, we can avoid these accidental fall downs, because they won't be able to take us away, because we'll be so full of Krishna consciousness ourselves that there won't be any chance for it. It's just like, I like this analogy where if you go to a Sunday feast and you eat till you're full, and you become so full that no matter what somebody offers you, whether it's a gulab jamun or it's a chocolate cake or anything, you're so full that you can't accept any more, you don't want to eat any more. So in the same way, we should be so full of Krishna consciousness, so full of Krishna that no matter what Maya tempts us with, we're just not interested in it, because we're so full, we're so absorbed in Krishna, and we're so full to the top that we don't have any interest in the most amazing thing, a mundane thing, you know. So in that way, we'll be satisfied, and because we'll be so deep in our Krishna consciousness, these external things won't take us away from our Krishna consciousness. So we have to have deep association, have attentive service, and we have to have like pastimes that we can meditate on, like Satyananda Maharaj said that, you know, these pastimes of Krishna are not just for reading, they're actually for remembering. So it's not like you just read it and that's it, I've done my reading and that's it, but we're supposed to think about those pastimes of Krishna, we're supposed to meditate on them during the day so we can remember Krishna's different pastimes. Otherwise we'll become subject to, like, you know, different things that will take us away from our service or our, you know, our reading or our chanting. We'll get distracted very easily, and then we'll end up either having an accidental fall down or a willful fall down. So we don't want to lament after that, you know, we could have done this or we could have done that. It's better to, you know, do it before it happens, to be actually wary of it and fill our life with proper Krishna consciousness, I suppose.
Sorry to ask a question, it's not prompted.
No, it's okay.
Why did Bharat Maharaj willfully willfully go for the day that he was experiencing bhava? I don't really understand.
Because we always have choice. We always have free will. We all, that's never going to be taken away from us, that minute independence, that free will. So we always have that. Krishna doesn't take that away, so but it's all our free will. If we willfully go towards Maya, it's our free will.
I asked the same question to myself, why would I want to willfully do something else, which sometimes catch myself doing, if I'm experiencing sort of, a lot of metta from Krishna consciousness, and ask myself the same question. For the same reason.
Yes.
I was listening to a class on these verses, a devotee called Nityananda Pram, he's from Chicago, and he says the reason Bharat Maharaj so made that choice was because he was just due to the kind of sudden nature of the occurrence of the mother dying, and he identified with his situation as a Kshatriya in that situation, and he willfully decided that it was his duty as the king to protect the deer. So he'd been a king for a very, very long time, and so sometimes we also, because we're a preaching movement, and we also make decisions that we feel, like Srila Prabhupada said, you need to take, just sometimes that devotee didn't want to go to Russia because he said, right, what about my consciousness? And so, because we thought he was going to have to eat meat, so we can feel that there's sometimes there are situations which we may perceive as being potentially risky, but we also feel that it's pleasing our authorities because we're in the preaching movement.
Well, he got that direct order from Srila Prabhupada, so, Prabhupada would be protecting him in that situation because that was a direct order from Srila Prabhupada, so disobeying that order would have been worse. You see, so that's why we need to follow authority. For somebody else, Prabhupada would have said no. But for that devotee, that particular devotee told him to go. So Prabhupada knows what's best for that person. Prabhupada would give different instructions for different devotees. So for some devotees it may be detrimental for them to go in that situation, but for other devotees it may not be, because they're strong enough. And so that's why we need to follow authority. So if Prabhupada told you directly go there, then you do that. But if Prabhupada tells you to do something else, you do that. That's why we need to follow authority. We don't just do things on our own volition.
So therefore it's never really appropriate for devotees to renounce devotee association. It's not like sannyas never means to give up devotee association. Is that that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah. We always have to have devotee association, and as I said, we may not be able to take directions from all the devotees at all times, but at least one person in our spiritual life, one person at least that we can accept their directions and have a deep relationship with.
Just something from the point that that's the danger of grihastha life, as we have spent so long with the life of attachment, so it takes us long to to diminish that attachment. That's why sannyasi can't meet his wife again in case it comes to, that's the kind of danger.
Yeah, so there's precautions that they have to take so that they don't get back into that attachment again. So it's so there are restrictions in each ashram to help, the particular persons in that ashram to progress. Brahmacharya has certain restrictions, that a householder has certain, a vanaprastha and a sannyasi has certain restrictions so that they can stay, in association with devotees and still, and not be distracted by Maya in different ways. So
There was just another question Felix asked as well, is that it may also be that when you are very elevated in your consciousness, you're thinking you can play around a little bit with Maya, and so you kind of relax, you think everything will be okay, I'm fine now, I'm completely in the mode of goodness, can't do anything wrong, and so it can be very, very, very subtle how it enters, and so you have to be on your guard against that, when things are going really well, it's not that that means you're not going to make any mistakes now,
Yeah.
You may even make more mistakes than when things are difficult, because when it's difficult, you're struggling like anything, you need help, you need encouragement.
Yeah, and another pitfall is that as we're making advancement, we start becoming proud. We think, oh, I'm on this level, and we might start committing offences against devotees, and that will be the cause of our fall down. So even if we're on the level of Bhava, if we offend a devotee, then we can fall down from that platform. So we have to be very careful that as we're advancing, we don't become proud of our advancement and unnecessarily, offend devotees or think not take their directions. We always have to, remain humble and accept directions from devotees. So it's another thing that we have to be careful of when we make more advancement. And the higher we are up the ladder, the harder we fall. So, if we're only at the first string of the ladder and we fall down, it's not going to be a big fall. But if we're in the top step of the ladder and we fall, we're going to fall right down, and it's going to be a lot more painful. It's going to be a lot more devastating for us. So we have to be more careful as we're going up the ladder that we don't fall.
Just another way of saying it, the more knowledge we have, the more responsible we're meant to be, so the greater the punishment. I think that's why India is said to suffer more, because she's got all the knowledge and she's rejecting it. So much more suffering.
Yeah, the more knowledge we have, as Rindu was saying, the more responsibility we have, and that's why we'll suffer more. We'll suffer twice as much, at least, if we have knowledge and we don't follow. If we know that if we know the regulative principles and we know it's wrong to break them, and we still break them, then we're going to suffer more. Whereas somebody who doesn't even know that meat eating is wrong, they're not going to suffer as much because they're in ignorance, they don't have enough knowledge. So the more knowledge we have, the more reaction we'll suffer for doing the wrong thing. So yeah. Is there anything else? So overall, we can see that Krishna is very kind and he protects the devotee, whether they are willfully falling down or accidentally falling down. Still, Krishna is helping both, and he revives the devotional servant. At some point, they may have to suffer something temporarily, but then Krishna will help them, come out of that after they learn their lesson.
Prabhupada also said that unmerciful death is the most great.
Yeah, so we have to pray we don't fall down, and we should think that I'm above Maya, and we should always be praying. Thank you very much.
Just have a small comment. You were speaking about we need to fulfill certain needs in Krishna consciousness to be able to function. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there is 4 needs that, unless one is Paramahamsa, there's 4 needs: physical needs, social needs, mental stimulation, and the study of Shastra. So I find that coming in that discussion, you can satisfy 3 out of 4 because it's a social need. So devotees will tell you about their life or how they think and what's happened to them when they were blah blah blah. So there's a very good social interaction, and also it's very stimulating mentally to have a Krishna conscious discussion, and also it's a study of Shastra. So I find it one of the best satisfying things, because mind is kind of not into it until you do it, but when you do it you think this is the best.
And also it's very pleasing to hear when the devotees discuss Krishna consciousness and themselves. It's very pleasing to Krishna. So that's actually what's going to be the most satisfying thing, is because Krishna is satisfied, then we'll automatically feel satisfied. So plus all the other needs that we have, it's fulfilling them, but it's also pleasing Krishna. So definitely sanghas are very, very important, and it will deepen our Krishna consciousness well more than on our own, and deepen our relationships with devotees, and help us to appreciate others' realizations. Overall, it's a very, very important part of spiritual life. In fact, without that, then devotee association isn't going to be very satisfying, unless we're actually having these discussions and deepening our Krishna consciousness is not going to be very satisfying for us. Because we could be in the association of devotees, but still on our own. We could have hundreds of devotees around us and still be in our own little world. So the sanghas actually help bring us together, as a community, to associate with each other. Thank you very much for discussing these nice topics. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Iskan Govind ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi.
Haribol. Hare Grace Jagannath Priya Mataji ki